Gain resident permit in Canada on Rural Renewal Stream program. Temporary foreign employees who are already employed full-time in Alberta and have a full-time employment offer from an Alberta business in a qualifying occupation are eligible for the Alberta Opportunity Stream. Candidates must either hold a valid LMIA, Labour Market Impact Assessment, exemption work permit or have a favourable LMIA result. Additionally, candidates must satisfy minimum qualifying requirements for type of residency and work permit, vocation, language, education, employment offer from Alberta, and work experience. An economic immigration program called the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, AAIP, recommends individuals for Alberta permanent residence. Candidates must have the necessary abilities to fill open positions in Alberta or have plans to buy or launch a business there. Additionally, they must be able to support their families. The Canadian and Albertan governments oversee the program. You, your spouse or common law partner, and any dependent children may apply for permanent residence status if you are nominated through the program. Applications for permanent residence are handled by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Final judgment on these applications are likewise rendered by the federal government. Eligibility. You must have a valid work permit at the time your application is submitted and at the time the AAIP evaluates your application, not status retained throughout processing, previously mentioned status, or restoration status. A valid work permit must satisfy one of the criteria listed below: a favorable Labour Market Impact Assessment, LMIA, an exemption from the LMIA granted to employees under one of the following conditions as determined by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, open work permits issued by IRCC to vulnerable workers who have shown they are experiencing abuse or are at risk of abuse in the context of their employment in Canada, including under the Vulnerable Workers Open Work Permit, VWOWP. Exemption, or the family members of a vulnerable worker under the VWOWP exempt. International trade agreements employees transferred within a company. International Experience Canada Mobilité Francophone R205D, for religious work. The quantity of applications received and the needs of the labor market determine the availability of AAIP streams, categories, paths, and pilots. The AAIP reserves the right, at any time, and without prior warning, to end the application process for any AAIP stream, category, pathway, or pilot. In addition, regardless of when applications were filed, the AAIP may decide not to consider submissions to streams, categories, paths, or pilots that have been closed or halted. The AAIP's eligibility requirements are periodically reviewed and could change at any time, without prior warning. Any submissions submitted are not subject to evaluation or processing by the AAIP. Applications to the AAIP are considered expressions of interest, and as such, will be handled in accordance with the quality of the application, completeness, eligibility, labor market data, occupational supply and demand forecasting, application volume to the AAIP, and any other factors at the AAIP's discretion. By submitting an application to the AAIP, you understand and agree that it might not be handled in the order it was received, if at all. Furthermore, the AAIP retains sole discretion over whether to review or proceed with any specific application, as well as the results of any such review or proceeding. Meeting program criteria does not ensure that a candidate's application will be considered, processed, or approved. Instead, they are minimal requirements for candidature. Regardless of the date an application was submitted, the AAIP reserves the right to evaluate applications using the most recent standards. Candidates must have a good chance of establishing themselves economically in Alberta, and the AAIP maintains the right to reject applications if it believes the candidate won't be able to do so. All applicants, excluding those who already hold a post-graduation work permit, you must have finished a minimum of high school coursework that meets Canadian standards as of January 1, 2021, at the time your application is submitted. Candidates had to have finished at least high school in their place of origin at the time of application if they filed their application before January 1, 2021. These candidates did not need to submit an ECA. Criteria for work experience. At the time your application is submitted, you are employed in your current occupation. At the time your application is submitted and at the time the AAIP evaluates your application, your present occupation must also line up with your work history. Your Alberta employer must operate as a company with a manufacturing facility, plant, or place of business in Alberta and be incorporated or registered by or under an act of the legislature of a province, territory, or the Parliament of Canada. You must have either a minimum of 24 months of full-time work experience in your current occupation in Canada or abroad within the last 30 months, or both, at the time your application is submitted. This work experience can be a combination of experience gained in Alberta, Canada, outside of Alberta, or abroad. Holders of post-graduation work permits must have completed 6 months of full-time employment in their present occupation in Alberta during the previous 18 months. All applicants, including those with post-graduation work permits, PGWPs, must have had work experience during the qualifying period that was full-time, for a minimum of 30 hours per week, for a profession similar to your current one, and that was authorized by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada with a valid temporary resident status if completed in Alberta or Canada. To be eligible, the employment conditions have to be compensated, full-time, minimum 30 hours per week, directly relevant to your current occupation, and acquired entirely in Alberta. Job offers that qualify all applicants, including PGWP holders, must have a legitimate full-time job offer or employment contract from an Alberta employer to work in your present occupation in Alberta at the time your application is submitted and at the time the AAIP evaluates your application. Your employment contract or job offer must be signed by both you and your Alberta employer and must include the following: a commitment to long-term, paid employment, full-time work, defined as a commitment of at least 30 hours per week for a period of 12 months or more, wages and benefits that meet the provincial minimum wage, and meet or surpass the criteria outlined in your LMIA. Please like, share, and subscribe.